In this video, I will show you the chassis plans that I came up with for my 1929 Model A Ford Roadster. For this project, I decided to use the suspension that I salvaged from a 1986 C4 Corvette. It was an Indy pace car convertible. Hi, I'm John from 1929FordHotRod.com. Using this suspension for my hot rod really complicated my life and increased the build time for my hot rod. In the end, I ended up with something that I think looks quite nice and very unique because I haven't seen too many Model A Ford Roadsters with Corvette suspension. The design of the front suspension was the most complicated part. There was a lot of cutting, welding, taking things apart, and redoing it until I got it right. Using the original front crossmember from the 1986 Corvette, this is what I ended up with. This was the easy part. Here for the front frame horn, I copied the pattern from an original 1928-31 Model A Ford. Using the original front crossmember, I measured, and did I say I measured? All of the brackets for the chassis were either plasma cut or cut on a metal cutting bandsaw and then sanded smooth on a 1-inch bench belt sander. The design that you see here can be easily adapted to just about any other hot rod that you would like to build. All welds were performed with a Miller 210 MIG welder. Should you choose to use this design for your own hot rod, if it's other than a Model A Ford, all you need to do is replace the frame rails in these plans with your own frame rails, but do not change any of the other dimensions as you will affect the performance of the suspension. In order for me to use the Corvette steering rack, I needed to weld in a small section of 2.5-inch tubing on the driver's side of the crossmember. To add a bit of strength to the front crossmember, I welded in 1/8-inch plate gussets to both sides, front and back, just for a little bit of extra insurance. I added in some additional support for the upper control arm mounts using 1/4-inch plate. For the lower control arm mounts, I used precision tubing that had an outside diameter of 1.25 inches and an inside diameter of 3/4 inch. I then pressed in bronze bushings at each end of these control arms that had an inside diameter of 1/2 inch. In this view, you will see the front rad mounts and the steering rack mounted to the crossmember. I have made every attempt to include as many dimensions as possible for these chassis plans. Should you choose to use a steering rack mounted on the rear of the crossmember, this little curved notch is not required. All of this information will be available in detail on my website at 1929FordHotRod.com. I was hoping to have my coilover shocks mounted inboard behind the radiator, but due to the small size and the stock wheelbase of 103.5 inches, I had to leave my coilovers on the outside of the frame. The majority of the nuts and bolts used in the Corvette are all metric. For the lower control arms, I needed to drill out the metal insert inside the rubber bushing with a coated 1/2-inch drill bit. This is a picture of the body mount just underneath the front cowl. All of the externally mounted body mounts on the frame were made from 2x2 tubing. I even found a way to adapt the 1986 Corvette brake booster to the frame. Now we're getting to the rear of the chassis. To the left of this picture is the mount for the front of the differential. This mount is welded at a 3-degree upward slope. To the right of this picture is the upper mount for a gas-charged shock. As I'm still using the original composite but highly modified Corvette monospring. At a later date, I will replace the gas-charged shock and the monospring with coilover shocks. This is a detailed view for the rear control arm mounts or dog bones and the mounting brackets for the rear differential. The rear of this chassis will fit neatly between the body rails of the Model A body. Once everything's assembled properly, the rear sway bar will not be touching the tire as it shows right now in the picture. When you compare this chassis design to the original Model A frame, you'll notice that the only thing the same is the wheelbase. I narrowed the front of the chassis to facilitate the Corvette suspension and narrowed the rear of the chassis so that the body would fit onto my chassis a little wee bit better. This is a picture of the mounting bracket for the rear end. At the top of this bracket I've also included a hole so that I can have an additional body mount, as I needed to get creative and I had to remove much of the floor in the rear of the body and cross members. This rear control arm mount was made from 2-inch square tubing. Since I'm going to use carriage bolts to mount the dog bones into this bracket, I needed to make the outside holes square. The Brookville Roadster body that I purchased was set up for a rumble seat. This was all removed, including a few of the cross members in the body, to make room for the chassis that had a 4-inch kick-up at the rear. In the end, the challenge of designing this chassis was well worth it. I believe I'll have something a little more unique than what you will see in a lot of other Model A Fords. I hope you find these chassis plans useful and can adapt them to something that you are building. Make sure you visit my website at 1929fordhotrod.com to download these plans. Feedback and comments are always welcome. Thanks for watching. Please visit my website at 1929fordhotrod.com.